out what's being done to save our biodiversity.
Every animal plays a significant role.
And if we're running out of time.
It seems that there is an uptrend in number of roadkills.
It's in our nature. Video on demand on CNA.Asia.
Taiwan. I have witnessed how it has evolved into a beacon of democracy in Asia and a bastion of Chinese culture and tradition.
Victoria Jan, CNA, Taipei.
Welcome back. Well, Greater China markets today are kicking off a new trading week with some caution, with concerns lingering over the U.S. central bank possibly tapering its asset buying program sooner than later. The mainland indices have been weaker today on sell-offs in the steel makers, pharmaceuticals, and the car makers. There may be some turnaround in Shanghai as the hour wears on, but in Hong Kong, it's the tech sector that is weakest today, weighing on the Hang Seng, off by about 0.6% right now. Brokerage shares there, though, have been marginally supporting the sentiment. And copper prices have been rocketing higher this year, with analysts forecasting that rally is likely to continue. The main driver being China's continued recovery from its slump from COVID-19. The benchmark copper price on the London Metals Exchange hit a record high earlier this month in May, more than $10,000 a ton. That's double what it was a year ago. Now, prices have remained above that 10,000 mark ever since, and the strategists at the Bank of America have now said they might even jump to 13,000 a ton. So none of this appears to be surprising for those who track this metal. The investors say copper is turning into a very attractive commodity, particularly as major countries are pushing for decarbonization. And that boosts demand for electric vehicles and wind and solar power generation stations. Now, copper is mainly used to make those electric cables. It is indispensable in the infrastructure build. China is the world's largest buyer of copper, consuming about half of all that global output. The impact of this pandemic appears to have done little to soften demand in China for the red metal, mainly due to China's speed of recovery. And in talks yesterday with the major domestic commodity companies, China's market regulators did warn industrial metal companies must maintain what they said was normal market order. The officials have urged those companies to not drive up the prices, warning against collusion and price manipulation. Now, the domestic industrial commodity prices have been plunging this morning. Take a look at these numbers from China. The most traded Dalian iron ore futures dropping there by nearly 7%. Copper and aluminium futures as well falling significantly. Now, across Asia, shares, though, in those miners and the trading companies, they've soared on rising demand for the metal. In fact, in recent months, the entire mining sector has outpaced tech. Still, some long-term investors would rather stay away, citing risks in putting their money in the sector, which depends heavily on economic conditions and market cycles. Now, at this point of the equity session, it's only Tokyo shares that are up. It seems Japanese sentiment today largely driven by demand for an accelerated pace of inoculations in order to support the economic recovery and boost equities. We have the electronics and the car makers giving the biggest boost to the broader topics today, but the Nikkei 225 is already up by 0.2% going into the lunch break, whilst fast retailing and FANUC continue to show up positively as well. Over in Seoul, the benchmark Kospi has been in reverse, with the major chip maker stocks there weighing on the index. And in Taiwan, it's the same decline in the semiconductor shares that's been a drag on the TAIEX today. You're watching Asia Now here on CNA.
I long to visit the other side of the Korean border. The desire has grown stronger ever since I started reporting on the Korean Peninsula. Many times, my dream to cross into the north had turned into despair. But recent development has restored my belief that there's still hope. It's not about unification, it is more about reuniting Koreans cruelly separated by politics and ideology.
Companies Countries across the Asia-Pacific region have been told to go green. So increasingly, all these efforts will be tied to the quantum of financing to be secured. But a lack of transparency in some of those supply chains appears to be hampering those efforts. Gwen Teo reports on some solutions and answers to that quandary.
For every tree that goes into making this furniture, seeds are sown for a new one. At least that's the idea. For the past 6 years, homegrown furnishing brand Scantique has offered to pay suppliers more for their wood as long as they plant new trees. It's doing this to offset the carbon it emits in the process of making its furniture. But as for whether those trees are really planted,
we take their word for it though, and then we actually do see photos that they send. Hey, by the way, we have done this, and it was okay, thanks, or like an agreement. It's all right, thanks, great.
While industry watchers say companies can manage compliance in their supply chain relatively cheaply with technology, the people in developing countries may not know how to use it. On top of that, Scantique doesn't really know how much carbon it produces from tree to table. And while there are entities that sell carbon offsets, there's no standard price, and this impacts operational costs.
Because there is no proper standard, it's very hard to enforce to say, hey, you need to do this, and you need to hit these certain measures. We kind of know we are heading in the right direction, but then to quantify is, okay, what's your carbon emission? What's your carbon footprint? And then to go to that extent, I think it's a bit more difficult.
In the last year and a half, Singapore has gotten a lot more serious about greening the financial sector. Besides strengthening its resilience to climate change, the country is also looking to help companies capture the benefits of sustainability. It's prepared to back this up with capital while encouraging green solutions and innovation.
For companies that want to keep track of their sustainability practices, it may be a case of being willing but unable to do so for now. But there are startups that are working on solutions that could help them in the near future.
One firm is hoping to help set a standard price of carbon globally with data. Currently, transactions take place between 2 parties at a time, and prices are not disclosed.
There is not a lot of transparency around what is transacted and what the price of that is. So what we've managed to do is work with those in that ecosystem through the landscape, and they are sharing their data with us, and now we're working with Platts, S&P Global Platts on global indexes. So we'll be able to bring something very new to the market.
As sustainable practices come under increasing scrutiny from governments, lenders and consumers, businesses are expected to walk the talk. And it all comes back to financing.
It's getting access to money, getting access to credit, where we see financial institutions increasingly putting green standards, if you will, on either loaning money for business acquisitions, right? And, we've seen, BlackRock and other really big financial institutions saying, look, we're not going to invest in companies that don't meet certain environmental standards.
With the environment increasingly a priority for consumers and crowdfunding also seen as a fast and effective way to raise cash, the onus is on businesses to make green a lot more transparent.
Much more ahead here on Asia Now. Stay with us on CNA.
Every time a business opens its doors, it opens up possibilities throughout Asia. And while some doors close, the will to try again never dies. There's nothing small about their commitment to Asia's future. And there's nothing small about our commitment to yours.